we find in chapter 2. They show up in verse 1 and disappear in verse 12, leaving behind many unanswered questions. Who are they, and where did they come from? How many were there? What is the star they saw, and how did it lead them to Bethlehem? How long after the birth of Jesus did they arrive in Jerusalem? How did they know that the baby was going to be the King of the Jews? Because of the mystery and unanswered questions, great legends grew up about them. Over the centuries, the wise men were given names: Caspar, Melchior, and Balthasar. They were venerated as saints, and tradition rose called the Adoration of the Magi. In fact, if you go to the cathedral in Cologne, Germany, you will find relics alleged to be the remains of the wise men. It all begins this way. After Jesus was born in Bethlehem in Judea, during the time of King Herod, Magi from the east came to Jerusalem and asked, "Where is the one who has been born King of the Jews?" Notice that the wise men are called Magi from the east. That's all we know about them. The term Magi is a Persian word that referred to a special class of priests in the Persian Empire. We know from other sources that the Magi had existed for hundreds of years before the time of Christ. They had their own religion. They are usually thought to have been followers of Zoroastrianism. I doubt if I even pronounced that right. Their own priesthood and their own writings. The book of Daniel makes it clear that they existed in his day, and even seems that Daniel was appointed head over the caste of the Magi in the time of King Darius. Who were the Magi? They were the professors and philosophers of their day. They were brilliant and highly educated scholars who were trained in medicine, history, religion, prophecy, and astronomy. They were also trained in what we call astrology. In our day, astrology has garnered a deservedly bad rap. But in the beginning, astrology was connected with man's search for God. The ancients studied the skies in order to find the answer to the great questions of life. Who am I? Why am I here? And where am I going? There is a difference between astronomy and astrology. Astronomy is the science of the study of the stars. Astrology is the belief that there is a connection between the position of the stars and human destiny. The Magi were experts in both astronomy and astrology, and claimed to be able to divine the future. The important fact for us to know is that they were highly influential in Persia. They were in fact advisors to the king. While they were not kings, it would not be wrong to call them kingmakers, because they functioned as political advisors to the Persian rulers. Finally, they were highly educated men who taught deeply about life, and consequently, it is a perfectly legitimate call them wise men. But why had they traveled so far from home? It was 1,000 miles from Persia to Israel. Why have they made such a treacherous journey? The answer is, they have come to see the baby born King of the Jews. This is fascinating. They knew a baby had been born, but they didn't know where. They knew he was a king, but didn't know his name. So they come to Jerusalem, the capital city, seeking help. They also assume that everyone must know about this baby, but a great surprise awaits them. We are greatly helped by this fact. We know that the Jews and the Persians had intermingled for at least 500 years. It seems that the Magi considered Daniel, who was a good Jew, as one of their own. Since the time of Daniel, the Persians had known of the Jewish expectation of a Messiah. It is possible that they even knew from the prophecy of the 70 weeks in Daniel chapter 9, the approximate time of his appearing. What they did not know was the exact time. When they saw the star, they knew the time had come. Now, at least that seemed like a mere speculation. Let me put it this way. Everything we know about the Jews, the Magi, and the history of the ancient Near East makes this story very likely. We know that the Jews were looking for a Messiah. We know that the Magi looked to the stars for guidance. We know that the Jews and the Magi had intermingled for at least 500 years. We know that the Magi would notice any new sign in the sky. Therefore, it should be no surprise that the Magi would travel to Jerusalem to greet this new Jewish king. The story of Matthew chapter 2 perfectly fits with everything we know. Most of our pictures of the Magi show three guys dressed like coneheads riding three camels across the desert. Nothing could be farther from reality. There is no way the Magi traveled 1,000 miles across the desert by themselves. The whole notion is ludicrous. In those days, the only way you could travel in the desert was in a large caravan. The Magi would have swept into Jerusalem with pomp and circumstance and covered with 1,000 miles worth of dust. At a minimum, they would have brought with them a full military escort along with their servants. The total party could have amounted to more than 300 men. No wonder all of Jerusalem was buzzing. The Magi are pagans who have been drawn to Jesus. Consider how little they knew. They had seen the star, and they knew a baby called the King of the Jews had been born. And yet, with nothing more than that, they risked everything and left their homeland to find the baby, bringing him gifts and worship him. This is the one of the greatest examples of true faith in the entire Bible. They didn't know very much about Jesus, but what they knew spurred them to action. When they got to Jerusalem, they assumed that everyone would know where the baby was. But they were in for a great surprise as they discovered that not everyone shared their desire to find Jesus. The reaction of Herod is fascinating. In Matthew chapter 2 and verse 3 says that when Herod heard the news, he was disturbed, and all Jerusalem with him. The word disturbed really means to shake violently. Herod was all shook up. It would help you understand what happened if you know that Herod the Great is very old, very sick, and very nearly dead. He is a dying man, teetering on an unstable throne. He has been in power for over 40 years and has proven to be a clever and cruel man. Like all despots, he held tightly to the reins of power and brutally removed anyone who got in his way. Over the years, he killed many people. His brother-in-law, his mother-in-law, his wife. It was the murder of his wife that drove him mad. He killed her because he thought she was a threat to his power. But he never got over her, even though he was only 44 when he killed her, and even though he lived to be 70. Her murder was the beginning of the end. You see, about everything else, Herod the Great was a killer. That was his nature. He killed out of spite, and he killed to stay in power. Human life meant nothing to him. The great historian Josephus called him barbaric. Another writer dubbed him the malevolent maniac. Yet another named him the great pervert. Perhaps his basic character can best be seen by an incident in the year 7 BC. Herod is an old man now. He has been in power 41 years. He knows he doesn't have much longer to live. Word comes that his sons are plotting to overthrow him. They are sons by his late wife, Miriam. He orders them put to death by strangulation. No wonder Caesar Augustus said, "It is safer to be Herod's soul than his son." He had been given the title of King of the Jews by the Roman Senate, but he was no Jew. By birth, he was an Edomian, a descendant of the ancient Edomites, whose father was Esau. The Jews hated him and chafed under his brutal rule. The notion of a baby born king of the Jews was a direct threat to Herod's throne. No wonder he tried to kill Jesus. In his eyes, he had no choice. It was kill or be killed. And now in the twilight of his life, he is ready to kill anyone who threatens him, even a tiny, helpless baby. Herod stands as a symbol for the kind of world Jesus entered. He represents the world's welcoming committee for the Son of God. It's not the way you thought it would be, is it? Jesus was born, and the rulers tried to kill him. The Bible says he came to what was his own, but his own did not receive him. In John chapter 1, verse 11. Herod stands for the bloodthirsty, cruel, vindictive side of the world system. A world where human life is cheap. A world where killing is accepted and even respected. Herod died, but his spirit lives on. To this day, there are those who are offended by Jesus, even by the mere mention of his name. They oppose spiritual truth and want to erase every trace of Christmas from public life. This group includes those cowardly school administrators who want even the word Christmas banished from the classroom, and the lawyers who sue to have the manger scenes removed from city halls across America. Herod would be proud of them. Before Herod can get rid of the baby, he must put on a pleasant face. He has to be seen interested in helping these strange visitors find the Christ child. So he turns to the scribes and priests for advice. He has only one question: where is this child to be born? The scribes don't have to look up. They already know the answer. 700 years earlier, the prophet Micah had predicted the Messiah's birth in Bethlehem. That was common knowledge in Israel. Little children learned that in Sabbath school before they were 6 years old. It's hard to believe that Herod didn't know it. If you add what the scribes knew to what the wise men figured out, you surely conclude that the signs of Jesus' coming were clear enough for anyone.